Hello, bonjour, sawadika. This is Out of the Clouds, a podcast at the crossroads between business and mindfulness. And I am your host, not your coach, Anne Muhlethaler. Today, my guest is Rajesh Ramani. Rajesh is a teacher, a mentor, a coach. I met Rajesh about 5 years ago on a trip to Thailand, where I was lucky enough to do a couple of sessions with him, which were, let's say, transformational is probably the best way to describe it. We have kept in touch, and I was lucky to be able to see him again on several occasions, both in Thailand and in Switzerland. And it's a real pleasure to be able to share this conversation with all of you. I hope that you'll greatly enjoy meeting or discovering Rajesh Ramani. Hi, Rajesh. It's really nice to see you. Starting from the top, just because I want you to get a chance to explain to our listeners, would you kindly introduce yourself and explain what it is that you do? In your own words, not in my words.
Yes. Thank you, Anne, for having me in your podcast today. And it's wonderful to have known you for a few years, I suppose now. And then we've been meeting each other in different places, actually in Europe and in Thailand as well. So to introduce about myself, I am a spiritual teacher and a life transformation expert, mentoring expert, as we can call it. But these are titles that we all need to use at some point or time. But giving you a background about myself, I come from India, from South India, where I was born and educated, and in a middle-class family and a bit orthodox religious family. I studied to become a cost and works accountant, and I was working in a bank. That was the first part of my career. So I was there for around 4 to 5 years. And in the meanwhile, I had the opportunity to somehow, I would say like now it would all be like a miraculous occurrences to meet my spiritual teacher. So in that period, and then connecting to my spiritual teacher changed my life, I would say. It changed my life firstly in a qualitative way, that I became more aware of myself. I became more aware of what I am inside, and then how I am thinking and how I'm relating with people around me and with myself. And it gave a bigger awareness around my habits and my needs. So this transformation that started happening within me and continued over a period of time, the next few years, which eventually led me to a conclusion one day that I thought like, you know what, I can do much more and help more people. My teacher was taking in monks as part of the monastery. So I went in there, and then I wanted to become a monk, and so that I can go out and help more people. Because in the meanwhile, while I was working in the bank, I also used all my spare time to go and talk to people and listen to people. I was also interested in a few social projects around where I was working. I even signed up to go and talk about AIDS awareness. And I was just 21. It was an interesting experience because I was talking to all these older people in the villages and about awareness and around AIDS. And I was also talking about health awareness and sanitation and other things. So I didn't realize then, but it was the momentum that pushed me towards working with people. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, I'm quite a shy, timid person. And, that's also till today, I'm that in my personal life. But I entered the monastery when I was 23 years old, and I had already worked for 5 years in the banking industry. And I come from a family of bankers, so it was not a surprise that I ended up there. But what was a surprise was that I left everything one day. I just walked out of everything towards finding this new life. The journey continued. I was trained in meditation. I was trained in philosophy. I was trained in mostly Eastern philosophy, and mostly trained through personal experiences, transformative experiences.
Interesting.
So the personal experiences ranged from meditative experiences to energy experiences, to emotional shifts and shifts in the way I look at the world and I understand the world and myself, shifts in the way I see the mind and understand the mind. So we went into deep transformational processes, meditating for days in end, sometimes without food, fasting. So all kinds of spiritual practices which were helping us, actually molding us in our own spiritual growth and also in trying to help out people. So, and it was not just being cloistered in a monastery the whole time, because after every few weeks of training, then we would walk, travel outside and stay with people, run classes and work one-on-one with them. So it was a full-on exercise in two ways. In one way is to equip myself in my own spiritual journey and growth, and in other sense to go out and share it with people, either through retreats or through workshops or through individual one-on-one sessions. So that was my journey for 14 years of my life. Mm-hmm. So when the organization went through some kind of a schism, so then I found myself asking fundamental questions again about where I belong and what do I want to do with my life. But one thing was pretty clear was that I want to continue to work with people and help people. And I also want to continue with my spiritual journey. And then I walked out into the world, and then my strength is what I would say is to convert all the spiritual teachings and principles to real life and to help people and everyone, including myself, to understand the world and to find the right responses to this world so that we live a fulfilled life and a life of happiness and peace.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you should say that it's not just for others, but for yourself, because when I saw you a few months ago in Switzerland for that self-leadership workshop that we'll talk about a bit more later, I really appreciated the way that you actually blended your personal experience to help the group understand the precepts and the teachings that you had to share, because it made everything suddenly just much more digestible and much easier to imagine blending into one's own life.
Yes, so absolutely true, because, we understand the world only through our perception. And those are our actual truths. If I speak about what you think, it is not my purview. It is not even my truth. So my truth is within myself and my learning is in myself. So when I work with people, I always see myself not being different from them in any respect. So every story people come up with, and I say like, me too. Mm-hmm. Because one part of me has gone through that experience, not to the same degree or not to the same level, but I can see myself in all those experiences. If someone says I'm a greedy person, I say, me too. If someone says I'm comparing myself all the time, I say, me too.
Yeah.
All these experiences are absolutely true. And when they say they are aware, and I say, oh, me too. Because all these are human experiences and we all encompass that in ourselves. So I think the power of learning comes from one's individual experiences. And if you look at in the past, all learning in whatever century people lived in, all learning happened through one's own personal experiences. And even the books that were written were all personal experiences. If you see most of the so-called scriptures and philosophies of Hinduism and Buddhism, which I am much more familiar with, they are all personal experiences of people, what they went through, what breakthrough they got. It was not textbook kind. Most of them were personal experiences. Some of them were distilled into textbook style later on. So it is only human experiences of transformation, and only that will speak, because it must be authentic.
Sure. It's story, basically. It's by reading story that you get to explain philosophy and spirituality.
Yes. All stories are also reflections of human nature and human mind, because it's only human beings writing those stories.
It's actually funny, because I listened to the webinar you sent me the other day, and you know what stuck with me? The story of Utkata. But do you mind telling that story? Because it was really interesting.
Yes, it is this story has been going around in different forms. And basically this story is about a woodcutter. And he was a strong man with a powerful axe. And then he goes searching for an employment, and he finds a job, and he starts cutting wood. So every day he would cut a number of trees and then chop them into small pieces. So the first day apparently he cut 10 trees, and then at the end of the week he could only cut 5 trees. So he was a bit concerned about his own abilities. So he thinks like, what is wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me. Am I not strong enough? Am I not good enough? What is wrong with me? So he goes and asks his boss, it's like, why do you think I am cutting less number of trees now? I think I'm working hard or harder. And then the boss asks him the question, like, when was the last time that you actually stopped to sharpen your axe? He says like, oh, I forgot that bit. And then the boss says like, that is the most important thing. You could put in so much effort, but giving time to sharpen your axe, though it may feel like, oh, it's a wasted time, but that sharpening of the axe improves your productivity. It makes it easy to go through whatever you're doing in life. And this sharpening of the axe, in this context, I would say is bringing self-awareness and awareness into oneself. Because we, as a person or as a being, is the person who is relating with the world around us. And if we don't know who is relating with the world, we will not know what decisions we are taking and how we are relating to the world. So it is quite essential not only to understand the world around us, but also to understand the person who is understanding the world. Yes, so that is quite essential. That's why it is really, really important. Whatever the job, whatever the nature of work that we do in our life, it's quite essential to know oneself. It may not be into a spiritual end. It may not be towards enlightenment or any such spiritual needs. But even in a practical, pragmatic need, we need to know who we are and how we understand the world.
For me, I also saw sharpening the axe was coming back to oneself rather than only awareness. Maybe it's just a different way of saying similar.
I speak about self-awareness. That's what you are saying as coming back to oneself. It's a self-awareness.
Sure. Yeah, because we spend so much of our time focusing on the past and the future, focusing on plans, managing expectations, anxiety, hopes, dreams, future, etc., which effectively means that we're not present. We're not in the present moment.
Yes, true. See, but the way our mind is structured, whenever we use the mind is basically a manager, one who knows to manage a situation. So the mind is also a protector. Its primary purpose is to keep you alive, physically, psychologically, and emotionally. So it goes around comparing, it goes around measuring everything, it goes around projecting future scenarios and trends and everything so that we feel safe now and also into the future. So the reason it goes into the past is only to project the future. So the past and the future cannot be separated from each other. People who live in the past also live in the future. People who live in the future also live in the past. But to make this mind come back to the present is an exercise in itself. In one way, it is actually going against the nature of the mind itself. So living in the present is something that we need to understand much deeper. It is not just like, staring at the pot of spaghetti in front of us.
Although that makes me hungry because it's almost lunchtime here.
Yes, true. It is not such simplicity. When people say like, you should live in the present all the time, I would say like, that's a wishful thinking. But the truth is, when we say living in the present, it is also knowing how this mind is constantly taking us into the future or into the past. So because all the thinking about the future and the past is actually happening in the present. Only thing is we forget. We forget that it's happening in the present and we get carried away.
Yeah.
But if we have the awareness that it is all happening in the present, then we could actually happily sit there and let the mind play all these games of the future and the past and enjoy it actually. It is like watching a movie in a cinema. At some point, if you believe this movie is absolutely real, then we either, throw a stone at that or we get upset and angry or, all of those things. But if you are so aware that you are actually watching a movie, and in that awareness, you can actually enjoy it as a movie, as actors and as people there and as me. So it is the same with the mind.
It's funny you're describing my meditation this morning. I was much more, it was very movie-like. It was not, it was not massively focused, but I quite enjoyed it. I was like, okay, so this is what is going on now. There it is.
True. If all you have in your meditation is only a restless mind spinning movie after movie, why not that be the focus of a meditation?
Sure.
We just sit there and then watch. Exactly. We just see okay, movie day. And then we watch it. That is the whole purpose of meditation.
That's a great way to describe it. It was movie day today. Yesterday wasn't movie day. Yesterday was...
Exactly.
What was yesterday? Loving kindness. It was metta. But today was definitely movie day.
Absolutely. There is nothing wrong about that. How many times in my practices that I've sat through a whole hour and then I walked away just saying one statement like, oh, it didn't happen.
Oh, that's really good. I like that.
Yes. See, I feel meditation is a happening. You can only create. It is not unlike sleep. You can only create an atmosphere for it to happen. You sit in a proper posture, you shut off all the sensory inputs as much as possible, and then you have something to focus, and then it has to happen. So if we are patient enough with ourselves, with attention, with a bit relaxed posture and feeling, then meditation has a greater chance of happening.
That sounds very wise and possible now.
Yes.
So I'd love to ask you, maybe just segueing from meditation, how do you work with the people who come to you at Kamalaya? Or maybe we could explain to the listeners where you are situated right now in the world.
Yes, I live in Koh Samui Island in Thailand, and for the past nearly 10 years, I've been working with Kamalaya Wellness Sanctuary as a mentor. So, as many of you might be knowing about Kamalaya Wellness Sanctuary, it's an amazing place to be. It is a place where a healing of the body, mind, and the spirit are addressed, not with any overtones of any spirituality directly or any hard work to be done, but it is more in a gentle space of creating one's own, space to learn and grow and transform and also become healthier with a bit of pampering and amazing food, which is also healthy at the same time. Yes, and all the different kinds of treatments. So we encompass a holistic approach towards living life and healing oneself. So I'm part of that team. And so I work with people on the mental, emotional, and the spiritual part of their journey.
Mm-hmm. I came to Kamalaya after I saw a friend of mine in London. She came into a conference room and she looked like she had a blazing sun radiating from within her. And then fast forward, I booked myself to come to Kamalaya, and maybe 3 or 4 days before flying, I lived in New York at the time, I bumped into a girl I knew in London called Chantal, and we go for brunch. And she says, oh, you're going to Thailand? That's great. She said, where are you going? And I said, oh, Koh Samui. And she said, oh, where? The Kamalaya. And then she proceeded to tell me that she arrived there by chance one day. She booked herself in just for relaxation. And then after being nicely pursued by the naturopath, who kept on saying, are you sure you don't want to see a few therapists and have some massages? She then ended up seeing you. And
I know her. I remember her.
So it was really fateful because I hadn't seen her for 3 or 4 years and I didn't even know she lived in New York. So then I got to Kamalaya and then mentioned that to the naturopath, who said, would you like to meet Rajesh? So I thought, sure.
Interesting meetings. Yeah.
Fateful. Yeah, for sure.
Fateful. Yes. One never knows.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit, how do you approach the work that you do with the people who come see you? I remember during our first conversation, you told me that you worked a lot before Kamalaya with business executives. I know you still have a lot of people that you work with outside of the space of Kamalaya remotely. How do you work with them, and give us a little flavor of what you do?
See, I always start with what people come to me with. We don't have an agenda, of course.
Sure.
And when people come to me with either they are stressed out, or they have a private personal relationship issues, or they are looking for what they want to do next in their lives. So depending on where they are and where they want to journey next, my job is basically to help them look into themselves. And as they look into themselves, I also give them tools to look into themselves. And I also show them how their minds would work. I'm not telling them exactly how their minds work, but I would show them how their minds could work. And see, whenever anybody sees what they are doing is not actually helpful, with sufficient strength of awareness and attention, naturally there is an impetus to change it and transform it. If you realize something that you're holding in your hand is actually weighing you down, and then it's not actually helping you, when there is a sufficient attention built towards that and an understanding about what it is causing you, naturally there is an action that arises from that situation. But many of us in life, we end up carrying, be it ideas, emotions, decisions, notions, opinions, either about ourselves or the world, carrying them for longer than necessary. What may have worked for us earlier at some point of time, we are still carrying it 10 years later. And we still believe somehow it is part of us, but it is not part of you. Just because you carry something for 5 years, it doesn't become part of you.
Sure.
It's still not part of you. When that awareness dawns on them, either through practices or through workouts or through just plain contemplation, or sometimes I take them through a deeper inner journey, because sometimes it is not just their thinking, but it's also their emotions that is involved. Sometimes it is much deeper than the surface level. So I help them to look at themselves, understand what they are doing, if it is really helpful for themselves. And with these 3 steps, automatically there is an action that happens. So I guide people towards achieving, in one sense, their potential. Their potential could be in terms of achievement in their career, it could be in terms of their personal, emotional, and relationship life. It could be in any area of life that they want to address.
That's very interesting. The reason why I was specifically turning to the business side is for a couple of reasons, because I see this in my work life day to day now in semi-confinement in Switzerland, that it's really tough to be in business right now around the world, and that there's a lot of weight on a lot of leaders' shoulders, whatever size teams, whatever size business they manage. Given the current situation, are there any sort of practices or that you would point for people to support them in crisis times like these?
Yes. So this is a kind of crisis that many of us never even imagined. See, nobody imagined that we would all be stuck inside our homes. Nobody imagined that we cannot even get a hug or a kiss. And another important area is, most people managed their stresses through getting out, doing something, going to the pub, going for a walk, going for a run, doing all those external activities through which we manage our stress. But if you take it in the business world, not just as an individual, but as a collective, we still don't know the amount of damage that it has caused. So everyone is trying to put numbers to it, but those numbers are not final. So we don't know. We are going to, it's like a landslide that has hit us. As we burrow down and then look at it, and then we will see what is intact and what is not, and how our behaviors as a society is going to change, how behaviors as individuals are changing. But in my experience, what I see is people are responding to it in a few ways. There are some set of people who are confined at home and they are pretty much bored, or they don't know what to do, and they are confined with people whom they are not used to spending so much time, and it's all on their faces. So that is one kind of suffering people are going through. The other kind of suffering is people who are working harder than earlier, because now all lines have been blurred or even disappeared between their personal and professional lives. So, and then so many people working from home or caregivers, and they are working like crazy. So there is the other extreme where people have lost their personal life. Earlier, at least, they had some kind of a inkling of it, but now they've lost even that. So that is also happening on the other end. And how people respond to this situation. People are angry. People are disappointed. Usually when they are angry or disappointed, they have their ways of handling it. Now those ways have also been closed. This is a huge thing. So people are keeping it inside. And then one gentleman recently in one of my calls asked this question. He says every time he has this Zoom meeting with his work team, and then he sees this seething anger in people. Even as they sit in their own living rooms and then are in a part of a meeting, there is this anger. It comes out as jabbing statements and things. So he asked me, like, how do I, as the coordinator of this meeting, actually help those people handle that anger? No, I said, like, what people actually miss at this point is a human connection, and create a simple human connection. Then we will all descend to be normal again, just in our minds for at least for a short period of time. Create more human connections. Let it not be like, oh, it's all business. Yes, it's only human beings doing business. It's not two algorithms working with each other. At the end of the day, we are humans. And if we forget that part, we'll forget or miss out on everything else. And handling this crisis, ask yourself, what is the most important thing? Survival always takes over. It's all about, the first survival is about the individual. Then the survival of people we are dependent on. So whether it is an institution, whether it is a business or it's the industry. So that's where. So it's all a survival mechanism. Yes, survival is really good. But what level of survival are we able to see and encompass? So if we can encompass a bigger survival of a bigger scheme of things or people, set of people, then if you are working towards that, and what is the right thing to do in that scenario, then we will have more space and choices, and better choices can be made from that place. If we make ourselves smaller and then shrink to only my survival and what about me, if that question dominates a lot, then we are going to suffer a lot, and then we are going to hurt people right and left. I'm not saying everyone is going to think about only the individual. But I'm saying, if you are already used to thinking about your team or your business, expand it a bit further. Wherever you are at present in your level of thinking, there's always a shrink that happens when we are exposed to a crisis.
Yeah.
Always. Everyone shrinks to a much basic level.
Sure.
So expand. First, see what is the right thing to do. If I'm not thinking about myself, what is the right thing to do? Then go about setting an agenda to do that action. When we work for the survival and best interests of a bigger society around us, we will automatically be included in that, and we will also be included in other people's circle.
Sure.
So that means, so many other people are working for our benefit as well. This is the time to expand one's consciousness, which is suddenly shrunk in the last 3 months. Expand it slowly and steadily to see a bigger picture, and then see what kind of action that is possible for me. Don't see a picture which is too vast where we cannot act. It's not like you and I sitting here and discussing about world politics while both of us are not in politics and have no say in any of those things. So that doesn't work. But if we can expand to the amount of the circle consciousness where we can make a difference, and that is where the heart comes in. In terms of crisis, in times of crisis, the mind would usually take over to say like, hey, you know what? This is my cup of tea. I have to act now. The heart will be pushed into the background. So bring the heart forward as well. I'm not saying you should completely function from the heart. It should be a combination of the mind and the heart. The mind going for a survival mode, the heart going for an expanding mode. So as we mix and match both, we'll find the right response. But in realistic terms, what should I do? In realistic terms, number one is bring more attention to your actions and your perceptions. Number two, stay away from negativity, whether negativity that is projected to us from outside or negativity that comes up within ourselves. And number three, invest on relationships. One thing that this whole crisis has been teaching us is the importance of real relationships. People who in the past believed that their independence and their space and their own time is all essential, and then they lived their life on their own terms, suddenly find themselves completely lonely now. Even earlier they were this lonely, but only on their own terms. Now, when society tells us like you cannot touch somebody else, or you cannot go and visit someone else, or you cannot go to a pub or a restaurant, suddenly this urge and this need has popped up a lot. This shows deep inside we ache to be connected. So cultivate relationships. Use this as an opportunity. Doesn't mean we should all live in the same room and be connected all the time, but the importance of relationships cannot be understated in terms of crisis. Mm-hmm. And this is a well-known fact based on studies in the past. Whenever similar economic crisis has happened in the past, be it for an individual or as a society as a whole, people who had better relationships survived it much better because they felt they were not alone. They felt supported. Your partner or your parent or your friend may not give you the money or the best ideas to survive this, but they may show the strength and the trust in you. And then they may give the meaning and purpose in our life. And this meaning and purpose brings this innate strength for us to overcome these challenges externally. Mm-hmm. So working on relationships are important. And then the fourth on that, what I would add is, let us widen ourselves and then see the interconnected nature of things. If we want to survive this, we are finding more and more that we have to be interconnected and we have to work together to get out of this. All the political conflicts that are happening today is all about like, hey, we are all supposed to be working together, but you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So we all assume that we are all working together, and then now we are fighting for it. If only we had really worked together, expecting something that like, hey, this is something that we have to work together and otherwise there is no other choice or chance, then I think this whole crisis could have been handled much better. I'm not blaming one person or one group, but it is all of us. It's an impetus in all of us. And we don't realize this unless we are exposed to some situation like this. And if understanding the interconnected nature of whether people or systems or of the whole
nature
earth itself, of nature itself, is a normal understanding, like a ever-present understanding in us, when these kind of crises come about, it will be so easy for us. Mm-hmm. We just have to regroup fast because we know how to regroup.
Sure.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I deeply believe in our interconnected nature as human beings and across species on our planet. So that speaks to me a lot. We were supposed to see each other in March because you were coming back to Zurich to do another workshop. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about self-leadership and what you were building outside Kamalaya with another couple of colleagues of yours.
Yes. See, we are building a platform called Self-Leadership Days. When we say Self-Leadership Days, we give people an opportunity to come together, work together, and grow together. So when we speak about self-leadership, it is the ability to know oneself, to understand where we arise from, to understand what are our needs, our expectations from oneself and from the world, what are our goals, our targets, our vision, and then how best to prepare ourselves to achieve our own potential. Mm-hmm. So self-leadership is self-observation or self-awareness plus knowing our goals and our visions with a target. So when we practice self-leadership, then we not only work on ourselves, but also work on the team, whether it is an organization or with your family, or with the society, everywhere. And it is not restricted to an individual. It is also for an organization. The organization as a whole can practice self-leadership, and the organization as a whole can observe itself and how its culture is, how its behavior, the values, and then, the goals. So when an organization is self-aware and brings self-leadership, automatically there is greater level of accountability, responsibility, and right decision-making. Mm-hmm. So through this platform, we try to bring in principles from the spiritual world and the psychological world from my side, and then my two other partners who are in the business world, and one is in the educational world. So we bring all our combined knowledge and expertise in trying to help people, not only in their business world and career, but also in their personal life. Mm-hmm. The individual cannot be separated from their work. Whenever people ask me the question like, work life and work versus life. I would say no, work is included in your life. You cannot separate it that way. So if as an individual we need to be fulfilled, we need to be successful, we have to redefine the way we understand success. We have to redefine the way we understand fulfillment and achievement. So then it is possible. The more smaller boxes that we create about in life, on a holistic or a complete sense, we could be failures. So it's not about achieving in one small area of our life.
Yeah, it's about life in its totality. It's a very holistic perspective.
Yes, exactly. You mentioned about the conference that we were supposed to have in March. The subject was to build emotional resilience.
Yeah, it sounds like a subject that's just really relevant right now.
Yes, exactly. This emotional resilience. I've seen people who have responded wonderfully well in this crisis, industry leaders and people from different aspects of life. These people have in one way or another practiced resilience. The resilience is the ability to flow, the ability to let go, the ability to not hold on tightly to an expectation or a view or an opinion or an emotion, And that doesn't happen in one day. As I mentioned earlier, when we encounter a crisis in life, immediately we shrink. Means what? We shrink to our base emotions, our opinions, our views, our expectations. So we naturally shrink. So unless we have practiced to open ourselves again and again, to let go, again and again, be it ideas, opinions, views, emotions, and our expectations. We cannot do it in a moment of crisis. So it's exactly like that. If I'm been running 10 kilometers every day or every week, and then when it comes to one day someone is chasing me, I can really run longer.
Thanks. That's a great metaphor.
Yes. And I cannot suddenly start running 10 kilometers on a single day. It doesn't work. I will fall flat after a few hundred meters. That's what happens. We cannot expect ourselves to do all of that thing. So emotional resilience is a continued practice. But to have an emotional resilience, one should really cultivate one's mind. We should start paying attention. A mind which is not attentive enough, the mind which is not focused enough, doesn't understand what is actually happening. So then we can know ourselves. Only when you know yourself, then you know that you are stuck in your views. Then when you know you are stuck in your views, then we can exercise flexibility. So then flexibility brings emotional flexibility.
Sure.
Then we see that how we are parked in either one end or the spectrum or the complete opposite of it. To go through this whole journey in knowing oneself, how we are stuck. Human mind is necessarily stuck in so many ways. That is also a good thing, because in one way we want to be sure about life. We want to be sure about our position. So that's why our mind always wants to get stuck. I like this. Okay, I don't want to lose it.
Sure, certainty.
I want to get it back. Certainty.
Grasping and greedily sticking
Holding
to certainty.
On.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And this crisis has pushed us all into this place of uncertainty. We don't know. Nobody knows. All the great political leaders, economic advisors, economic leaders, medical leaders, everyone is giving vague statements because basically nobody knows. They are just projecting scenario after scenario. Nobody knows. And this is creating immense insecurity in all of us and uncertainty in all of us. So how to handle uncertainty? Only when we have known how to handle uncertainty in the past. People who have not known how to handle uncertainty, who have just jumped from one uncertainty, whenever there is an uncertainty exposed in one area of life, they've just jumped to something else that is certain.
Sure.
Yes. So they've not been trained to handle uncertainty. Uncertainty in terms of information, in terms of control, in terms of future. So they've not trained. Luckily for me, from my spiritual training, this uncertainty was always there. Every day was a new day, and every day anything could change. So we were exposed to that. Even in our monastic life, it was like that. There was nothing uncertain about life. So as we went through that for 14 or 15 years of life, automatically that is normal. Uncertainty. Yeah, I expected this. It changed. Okay, it changed.
Yeah.
So I think, you don't have to be in a spiritual world to do that. Uncertainty is an educator. It is everywhere in every area of our life. We just need to pay attention to it, and we need to develop that quality within us. And through these conferences, we give tools to people to do that.
I think I understood you are working on bringing the conferences online so that you're not constrained by the current and possibly long travel bans that we're going to experience.
Yes, we are exploring all kinds of avenues, the online work as well as doing it in person, because I know some levels of knowledge and knowledge transfer is much easier in an online setup. But when we go more into a transformational mode, which is what we are focusing on in these conferences, two things come into play. One is the group consciousness, The group consciousness as a whole will help people to make this transition. It is not just individuals' understanding of concepts or digesting information.
Oh, I completely
It is much more than that.
Yeah.
Yes. And the second concept is also gives a space and time capsule where we are locked in so that there is much more focus and concentration. For all its upsides of online work, one downside is we are not sitting together for 9 hours in a day or 24 hours together on an online setup. After 1 hour of a call, we all walk out and then move out into a different state of consciousness or a mindset. And that automatically takes away our focus. Some kinds of learning, it is necessary to sit with it, as we say, to sit in contemplation, because it takes time for certain breakthroughs to happen in our mind. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the mind just reverts back. We used to say, as an example or an analogy, we used to say, if you want to dig a well to get water, you can't just go digging 10 feet and 10 feet in 20 different places. Of course, you have effectively dug 200 feet, but you don't get water. So,
nice.
So it is with, our effort. When we make effort, the effort sometimes needs tremendous concentration, tremendous focus. We are going to work probably with combination of both online plus in-person conferences.
That's great. The reason why I ask is, listen, in the situation that we are in, one of the things that has appeared to me, because I have access to technology, but I'm able to actually connect with teachers and friends and sort of participate with them in certain settings in a way that I wouldn't have expected in the past, because we are in different continents. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree. Having sat in retreats and sat with you at the previous workshop, I don't doubt that it's better in person, and the group dynamic makes a really big difference. But I appreciate that some of my friends who I think would, I don't mind saying it here, would greatly benefit and enjoy the emotional resilience workshop. I hope you do something online, because not knowing you, they might have not made the trip from London or somewhere else to come attend the workshop. So maybe you can give like a reduced, like a taster version for people who might want to dig deeper later on.
Absolutely. We will be doing that. Even in the last podcast, we were addressing those issues, and then we'll be working on more podcasts or webinars and all of that, both an online presence and as well as a physical presence.
One of the things that I wanted to ask that's going to come up for a lot of people, I think, around this time, it's how to handle grief. And obviously, you remember that the year that I did come to Kamalaya the first time, it was about 10 months after my mum passed away. Actually, I should ask you, how is your family?
My family, they are good, but they are in the epicenter of the virus, actually. So they are in the red zone in India.
Wow.
And they are fine as of now. They've been extremely careful and completely locked down in this period. They are doing really fine. And they are much more confident of going through this. But it is a worrisome issue, because I'm thousands and thousands of miles away in that sense. It's not just the distance, but it is the inability to reach them if anything happens. So that is much more scary, So, and everyone knows that, it's not like it's not easy that way. But they are doing very well, yes.
I'm glad to hear that.
Given the circumstances, yes.
Yeah. So some friends of mine have already lost a member of their family in the last couple of weeks. On Sunday last week, I got the bad news that one of my old colleagues had passed away, not from coronavirus, from cancer, but it was a really big shock for everyone. And she was a fixture at the company that I used to be at very early on. And it feels like a whole piece of my life, is crumbling in a way. But I'm very aware that a lot of us are going to be dealing with grief. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts or advice as to how we can consider working with grief.
See, the best way to handle grief is to grieve properly.
Yes.
People should not be hiding behind concepts of strength, concepts of I can do better than this kind of stuff, And also there is no one proper method of grieving. It depends on the individual. It depends on the individual's relationship, individual's expectations from the world and from themselves. So it depends on the individual completely. But having said that, the individual should give themselves the freedom to express their grief. This coronavirus time, the grief is compounded, not just because of the imminent threat of death, but it also takes away the usual methods of grieving away from us. What happened in countries like Italy, that is much terrible. You can't see your loved ones at all once they walk into the facility, and then you have no idea whether they will be back out or not. There are no last words or lost kiss or lost hug. So there is nothing. And nobody gives a hug just in case you don't return. No, we don't do that. So those are huge losses. And in terms of our inability to close, inability to have that kind of a closure. So that adds on to this grief. So I would say grieve openly. Allow yourself to feel the pain and suffering. Do not get caught up into statements of guilt, because it's so easy in these situations to get caught up into guilt stories. Stories like, I should have done this, I could have done differently, we could have done something else. Sometimes, in many cases where we have seen is inadvertently people become the carriers of the virus to the older people in their family. One never knows where you get something. So, and in those cases, the burden of guilt will be much higher. I could have, I should have, why was I so reckless? So being caught up in all those guilt trips, which our mind would want to because it wants to find some meaning for what is happening.
Sure.
Becoming free of that is essential, because then we are not actually focusing on the lost people in our lives, but we are focused on our own self. It is basically like me, while someone else had suffered and someone has passed away. So being aware of the guilt stories, being patient and kind with oneself through this journey. The reasons of why it happened, how it happened is not essential. What is more important is to focus on the connection with such people, with the lost ones, the times that we spent, the meaning that this person brought to our life. So all that is essential. Then we focus and grieve properly. Otherwise, we can park that as anger or guilt in some other parts of our life, which is not doing justice either to the other person or to oneself.
That makes sense. I really appreciate that. I feel really lucky because even when my mum passed away, I never got caught up in the guilt. I think the guilt never really surfaced.
Yes. See, the pain of the death will be there. Initially the shock will wear off, and then the pain will start coming in, and then it will take time. Come in waves and waves, so it doesn't have to happen within 3 months or 6 months. There is no fixed timing for this. It's just how each individual handles it and how close they were and what amount of shock it created in them. So it has so many factors. I would say give yourself time to grieve and mourn. Take that time. There is no urgency. It is not like, I should get out of it within a few months or weeks or whatever it is. There's nothing like that. And it is one important thing that I would say here is, though it is a personal suffering, but it is also a collective suffering.
Sure.
We are going through a collective suffering in this regard, and as an individual and as a society. And in one sense, if we recognize that, we will see this kindness and compassion spreading out to more people around us as well. And that way, the weight of personal grief will be much reduced. And most of us get caught up in the personal grief rather than the actual suffering.
I see
it will
that.
be much better to handle that. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think that will be really useful for a lot of people to hear. I reckon that's one of the most precious things that we did together is sometimes you also need someone else to allow you to grieve in a certain way. Sometimes you need the external affirmation or support that you can let go into the tears and the flood and the...
Yes, it is. It is quite essential, In many of our societies, it is such a taboo to do that. And then, people are all in some kind of a museum-like setting, where you are not supposed to make any noises and you are all supposed to be in a library kind of setting.
You're describing Switzerland here.
It is true in many societies, actually. And you know what used to happen? It still happens in India. They have these professional mourners. In small villages and towns, have professional mourners. So they come in whenever there is a death in some part of some family or something, they come in and then they sing these mournful songs and then they beat their chest and then they
wail.
They go wail and then weep. And then anybody who is showing some kind of a stoicism and then, trying to be all this, they go and, open them all up, rip them all up, and then let it out. The beauty of that experience is it's cathartic in the sense that, they create this immense atmosphere for anyone to get out of it. And then if you see them in a few days, everyone is jumping up and down and there is no hush hush, it's all like celebration after a few days. So they could transition. And these are like kind of agents, as you say, who go and do that. Because it is a norm in the society. So it is so easy for people to get out of it.
I like the idea of the professional mourners helping us get the tears out. That's very helpful.
Yes.
Get the drama out there.
Yes, get the drama out, whatever it is, whether it is tears, guilt, anger, anything that is there, suppress the shock, everything. Just let it out, bring it out, and then, in the heat of things, and then everything, let it out. And eventually, the mind gets into its restful place automatically.
So while you're talking about that, as you brought in the mourners, it made me think, I don't know why, this is a segue that makes no real sense. The last conversation we had in Kamalaya, we had a really great guided meditation, but we talked about Indian gods and goddesses.
Yes.
And it feels like there's a god for every occasion. Is there one that you feel, and I mean this in a playful way, but is there one that you feel would be good to connect with at this time as a source of comfort or to express the anger or the difficulty you are going through?
So, can connect to the goddess Kali.
Can you please explain who Kali is for our listeners?
So she's the feminine aspect of chaos. So, and then the rebirth of order from chaos. So she's in a sense, she's the destroyer, but destroyer of those aspects of life which are already dying. So the universe is a constant dynamic being in a way, the process. So whenever anything gets stuck and gets solidified, it has to be chiseled away. So, and particularly the old and then the dying and then the rotten, Kali is the goddess who comes with all the, the spears and then the swords and everything, and then tramples upon everything that is dead and evil in that sense. So it is not about individuals or people. It is about mindsets, ideas, views, systems. So whatever it is that is stopping us or stuck, that is where the focus is. So she is the goddess now. And she is also this angry, bloodthirsty one. That is the good one now to be focused on. Yes. But, once you focus on that, then she morphs into the other one, the peaceful one, and, the one with silence and everything. She morphs into that one.
Yeah, I had heard that Kali is one of the aspects of Shakti that's very connected to Mother Nature as well, right? And part of what we see with everybody being confined in their homes is obviously our planet has a chance to breathe. So it feels very Kali-like, this sort of sweeping virus that is just locking us in our homes whilst the animals are just going around and looking at us being locked in.
Yes, exactly. It is true, as you say, these are different aspects of Mother Nature. See, nature can be so protective and so nurturing in one sense, and then nature has its fury. We should understand the life in all forms of it. It's not just like nature is something that we have to overcome all the time. Not necessarily, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we just have to flow with nature, and then we have to create this symbiotic relationship. And sometimes, sometimes, yes, we have to fight nature. Sometimes, yes, you have to protect yourself. Some other times we have to flow with it. I believe, we are digressing a little bit on this, but I believe, in the past few hundred years, because of all our machines and every technology, suddenly we, to some extent, lost respect for nature. So not respect in a sacred sense, but respect in a power sense. Suddenly we didn't realize the power of nature. And we thought like, hey, I have got this and that and this, and then I can turn around rivers and I can empty the mountains and I can do so many other stuff. And then we got completely blindsided. So in spite of everything that we know and understand, that is essential, for all of our strengths, we need a sense of humility, like the pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, we are just a tiny dot, even to our own knowledge. It's not that we don't know it, we absolutely know it, but we are still that tiny little dot. Yeah. So when we understand that, then we act responsibly. It's not about nobody is going to save planet Earth. Planet Earth will save itself. It's just like, how relevant are we going to be in this whole system? That is what we are more concerned about. So if we want to be relevant, we have to be acting with some kind of humility and responsibility.
Yeah, I like that. To be relevant, find your humility versus nature. Yeah.
Exactly.
Rajesh, thank you so much for spending all this time talking to me this morning. You're obviously a very, you seem, you're a teacher, you're a very balanced person. What are you really not good at?
A million things.
Thank you.
You can, if you can list them, and then you could go much more.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. It is only our ego which says we are good at everything. That is absolutely nonsense. So we are good at maybe a handful of things to some extent. Even, we are the judge of our own levels and standards. That's it.
Sure. So tell me, what book are you reading at the moment? Anything that you've enjoyed recently that you would recommend?
I've been reading two books, actually. One is on the Bhagavad Gita, because yes. And I've been reading it now, but it's a slow read because it's not about reading the book, but it's about meditating on it. That's been one. And then the other book was, this week I picked up on the 50 greatest short stories collection. So from around the world. So that's a nice book that I've been reading the last few days, I would say.
That sounds lovely.
It has everything in it to create a life of great potential. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then I know that you are sometimes partial to Netflix. Anything good you've watched lately?
I've been trying to watch a few things on friends' recommendations, but then they push me back right away. How many series that I've stopped after 15 minutes because I couldn't take on
the commitment.
The violence.
Is it the commitment or the violence? Okay.
Both. A bit of violence, and then I think like, am I going to spend like 4 seasons and like 440 hours or whatever it is of my time on this story? So then it kicks in. So, but I've been keeping myself watching something lighter. Like I've been watching something called Kim's Convenience Store. It's some kind of a comedy from Canadian comedy.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, that keeps me feel good. So
okay, I get that. But is there anything else you would like to sort of add to anyone who's listening?
See, one thing I would like to add here is focus on 2 aspects of life. The first aspect is to strengthen your awareness and your attention. The more we know, the better we are informed about ourselves and the world, and better our responses to life. It is quite important to be more aware. And secondly, be kind. There are a million factors that are functioning upon us. We are not the center of the universe. And even within this world, we human beings are also part of this big recycling system that has been happening. So even in the emotional and the mental sphere, there are so many factors that affect. So be kind. Be kind to yourself. And see the other person next to you is also caught up in the same mess, be it mental, physical, or emotional, and then be kind to them. If we practice these 2 things, we'll have a much, much, much better life, and all our responses would come from a greater place. That brings humility, that brings gratitude, that brings all the other stuff that is necessary for life, and that brings enormous success, which we can all partake.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. If people want to get in touch with you after this,
they can find me in my LinkedIn account, which I'm more active.
Okay, so I'll post it in the show notes as well.
They can find me in at Kamalaya in Koh Samui, Thailand, or they can also find me in selfleadershipdays.com.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
They can find me through you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll put all of these links in the show notes.
Yes, please do.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. And hopefully we'll speak again very soon.
We'll speak again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
I hope that you've enjoyed my conversation with Rajesh. You can find more details about his project, selfleadershipdays.com. He will be offering some online courses later on in the year, if I'm correct, particularly around the subject of emotional resilience. Of course, you can also find further details about him at kamalaya.com. All details are included in the show notes. So feel free to rate and review this podcast and, of course, subscribe. Until next time, thank you again for listening. Be well, wash your hands, continue to social distance, all of that good stuff. Thank you.